LCS waiting room and stylings by Raz. Did those go out?
Stylings by Raz.
Yeah, Raz was singing up a storm.
Yeah.
Oh, that.
He is always singing or making some sort of noise before the camera comes on.
Yes, maybe a little bit. If there's a lot of talking happening, I'm just gonna start screaming.
We will be joined by Jensen shortly, but first, let's talk about yesterday.
Ooh.
Some surprises, some not so surprised.
Yeah.
So Jet, you were the only one that predicted the Fly 3-0.
Yeah.
I thought Fly would win, but I thought it'd be a lot messier, a lot more like what the entirety of Game 2 looked like.
Yeah, and to be fair, Game 2 did look like it should have been a 100 Thieves win if FlyQuest wasn't able to just consistently find perfect flanks on a double if really fed Jinx. But it definitely felt like that 100 Thieves in all 3 games really just wanted double lift to carry, and then in all 3 games, Impact really wanted to just buy Anathemas.
Yep.
And that solved that, and so FlyQuest win all 3 games.
Every fight, I know this was the first fight where it kind of felt like it was happening, but like there was a Wukong in the back line, so congratulations for Speaker for the player of the series for that moment, multiple moments. And then there was, yes, you're right, his Cassante that was kind of constantly doing it. Dhokla was a constant as well in finding flanks. And the funniest one was there was a Rift Herald fight where then you see Prince going in on the flank as Zeri. So I was like, okay, so the back line is just never protected.
Yeah, I mean, Impact even said, he's like, we knew going in, they play this one style, they need double lift to carry. And yeah, like you said, Jet, his response was Anathemas. They made sure that they could get on top of him in a lot of these team fights. And I've been pretty critical of FlyQuest's team fighting, not in the execution necessarily, but in their setups and when they choose to fight. And I thought that did look a lot better in the series.
Yeah, the Prince double lift tweet. Yes, I'm winning.
It's just a return to form too. I know asking a lot of players about who they expected to move on. A lot of people were starting to say 100 Thieves because of the huge upswing that they were having at the end of the regular season, and that FlyQuest was starting to falter. And it feels like every time playoffs rolls through, something changes. And it feels like FlyQuest specifically are a team that suddenly you have to fully respect going into the next round. So I'm excited to see who meets them.
Yeah, and if you are excited, did you know that we're officially live with tickets for the LCS Spring Final in Raleigh, North Carolina, April 8th and 9th. So if you, like Raz, are super excited about FlyQuest win yesterday, they have already locked in their trip to Finals weekend. And if you are a fan, you can head over to Ticketmaster.com right now to get your tickets to Finals before they are all gone.
True.
So we have a little bet that happened between us and a member of the community, LCS super fan, Numi. She's also a member of the NA Men podcast.
Oh, yes.
That CLG would finish 3rd overall. Now, if you remember, this was my 10%.
3rd.
In my 90-50-10.
Yeah.
It was just for the first half of the split. She bet that it was going to be for the entirety of the split. So let's cue up that little clip to see what she has to do.
She's a big, like, active community member and, like, does the NA Men podcast and stuff like that. She should put her own money where her mouth is and do a hot pepper bet that they're top 3.
True.
I'll be on the far side if anyone wants to join me.
I'll take it.
Jat and I will eat a hot pepper if you're right, Numi. And if you're wrong, you do it. You can guess on the analyst.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Top 3!
Close.
Honestly, I made a very similar bet last split, and I just decided if I could do it again for spring and see what happens.
Did you win that bet?
I unfortunately did not. However, I was very close.
Okay.
A risk taker. We like it. Well, here is Mark out to bring...
Mark will be casting today, which is why he hasn't been on the waiting room.
Pick whichever you like.
The smallest one, preferably?
Yeah, you take one.
I don't know, the smallest ones pack the biggest punch.
You never know, actually. If it's bigger, then it's less.
There's milk here if you need
Okay,
it, and
sweet.
there's more off-site if
Will do.
Raz can grab that one.
So, Mark, it was just you and me that were on the line. Raz and Emily didn't even...
I would
do
have
the hot
eaten
pepper.
one.
Oh,
I ate one last time.
If I wasn't casting, I'd eat one right now, too.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Just to
nice
get it on.
excuse.
Well, you're a coward. You
I mean, you're not casting for 24 minutes, Mark.
Why did I do it?
Raz was one of
go
you.
for it.
Where's both was left?
Okay, let's see.
Oh, this is going to be painful. I already
Yeah.
have it ready for you.
Yeah, so tell me, how is CLG going to perform in today's series?
You caught me mid-swallow, unfortunately. No.
Water too.
Actually, I will take a sip of this first, actually.
Okay.
Okay. Is it hitting already?
Oh, that's a fast one.
Raz, I have to say she's handling this a lot better than you.
Oh, look, there was an initial like 10 seconds where I thought I was in the clear. All right, I'm just putting this out there. It hits a little later than you think.
So what are CLG's biggest strengths?
I really like how scrappy they are as a team. I usually think that when
Your face is starting to red.
Yeah, well, I think that they're usually one of the first few teams that jump ahead on the meta. So last split with this roster, they jumped ahead on Enchanter bot lane, which I thought was really interesting during week 1 and week 2. And specifically for this split, they also jumped on Asol after the rework as well. So I think one of their strengths is definitely like playing to the meta or being ahead of the meta as opposed to other teams. And honestly, like we've been talking about, they're kind of a really scrappy team. I like how they take a lot of risks, specifically Contractz. Did a really good job in the last game.
Yeah.
Like honestly, that C9 like CLG game, Contractz just killed it, right? So I think one of their strengths is what they're going to do today's game is honestly just beat C9 at their own game, right? They know what they're doing and they're confident and they're willing to move forward.
This is impressive.
You
Your
are
voice
crushing it.
is staying the
Raz,
same, but I can see your eyes just getting more and more watery, so it's hitting.
Oh yeah, I'm struggling now. I'm not really good with spicy things. I'm struggling, but
No, you're handling it like a pro, honestly.
That's insane.
Yeah,
What the
congratulations.
hell? What do they put in those things? Can I have a pepper? Can you throw me one?
I would like to
Raz,
challenge
they're
you.
right there if you
Yeah.
want.
Oh, okay, I didn't see them. Look,
for
if it's just that easy.
I took a smaller
Oh,
one,
God,
so.
no.
Yeah, it's just that easy. Do the whole thing.
Yeah, it's just that easy.
Just throw it
God,
back.
maybe I need.
All right.
I'm a little sweaty now.
Just go for it.
Oh
my God.
So bad with the last time.
Oh God, this is gonna be interesting. Well,
Oh, no.
thank you
Me
so
and Barry the
much.
milk, I'd appreciate it. Somebody.
Thank you so much, Yumi, for joining us and delivering on the bet. All the best to CLG against C9 today. And both teams know that a win guarantees them a spot in Raleigh for the spring final. So let's listen to their take on it.
Feeling good about playoffs. I think we really made a resurgence in the last couple of weeks to get to top 4 at the end. So feeling confident and playing in the stadium is my goal. So win one best of 5 and we're already there. So I'm really excited for that.
My first time playoffs, and I'm wondering of semi-final and final because I heard there are like 10K crowds. So yeah, because of that, I'm pretty excited to play playoffs.
Why did I even do
And now
this?
Yeah, why did you do this, Raz?
I'm like shaking.
Raz won the bet and did this to himself. We are now joined by Jensen.
Welcome.
Thank you so
Welcome.
much. How have you been?
You want a pepper? I'm not here. You can bring it over.
I think I'm good for now, but I think I'm as good as someone who could make playoffs.
Yeah.
Well, you made it here.
Raz is just dead.
Yeah, I know. I'm.
So it's just
I'm
the
a
three of
little
us.
That's just the three
concerned.
of us.
Yeah, you guys got this.
You have tears rolling.
What the hell? What did we give her?
I don't know. She crushed it, and you are struggling a little bit. While we wait
I love milk.
for Raz, Numi did talk a little bit about Contractz and what a good game he had. So in that single game that they did win against C9, because I think we all know this is going to be a pretty, or in my opinion, it's going to be an uphill battle for CLG, right?
Yep.
So I did want to go over
We can see.
some of the. This is not the clip. I need here.
Clip selector.
Let's see. All right. So we're going to go through Contract's first initial early path. You see that he gets spotted out by the Ashe here. And I wanted to reiterate just how strong of an early game he did manage to have. He clears his entire bot side camps and then actually takes this path here. Right here, it's actually crucial to note that Emenes does not actually see him as he's pathing up here. And he comes up to top lane. It was really interesting to hear him talk about this because basically he said a lot of people make the assumption that you can't gank top if it's like a tank v tank matchup or if it's a little bit more boring. He actually said he remembers hearing so many times like, oh no, you can actually take these matchups, sets Dhokla ahead, and then he's gonna go through the rest of his camps here.
Saw him that time.
Yeah, they did. But he's gonna be up here while, if you notice, Blaber is, oh, that was
big
way
circle.
too big, yeah.
whole
But is down in the brush, so they basically trade birds, and Blaber is gonna come in here first. Palafox flashes out, but Contractz is right here to respond because they did trade, so it's a good response from Blaber, but another counter response from Contractz. So he ends up getting those 2 kills right off the bat. Is then gonna go through, I think, the other really important, he's gonna go through his top side of the map now. The other really important thing here to note is that C9's lanes are pushing really hard. So obviously they have bot side control. Blaber is gonna start up Drake. They're gonna have mid, and then the only lane that CLG has is that top side, and that's actually gonna become really important when Sion makes a roam down. C9 has a perfect setup on Drake, and Contractz ends up stealing it, which is very lucky because C9 actually has Drake stacking here. And then this is what I was talking about with the lane prio in response. After Sion is able to push that up, he actually roams down to join Palafox to get this second kill onto Emenes. I just thought it was a really good, well-coordinated game, obviously set up by Contractz initially, but if you're going to be going up against C9, the best early game team in the league, I do think you need to have some sort of strategy like this, where you are, you know, skipping camps to kind of cheese gang top like that, or setting up a lot of things early, because C9 is just so formidable in the early stages of the game. And even there, we could see Blaber did have actually a really good response around his lanes to what was happening.
Yeah, and I know, Jensen, you were actually talking about that exact game earlier in the day. What was your read on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Contractz as a player is very interesting to watch. He's a big coin flipper, I would say. Some games he gets off to a really hot start, other times quite the opposite. And I think this is exactly what CLG needs to be able to beat C9 today. You know, Contractz works really well in the early game if he gets off on the right foot, which I hope he does, so we can have a good series on our hand. But yeah, it's been fun to watch him.
Yeah, and one other thing I wanted to ask you, this is a little bit more general, but you obviously won the whole split with Cloud9 last year.
Yeah.
And they're now the first place team. So it's yet to be seen, actually, if you don't need to comment if they're better or worse last year or this year, but how
they're worse.
How different are they? Like, what do you see anything that they're doing differently than they were doing when you were on the team?
Yeah, I think the 4 other players are playing a lot better now than they did last year. No, but on a serious note, I think Emenes plays a lot more aggressive mid lane than I did. He takes a lot more risks. So I think the way they're playing is a bit more around mid lane now. As you saw in the last clip, Emenes dies quite a bit sometimes. So I think they have to play around him a bit more than they did with me, where I think I'm more flexible in the sense that, like, I'm okay with like playing some losing matchups here and there, where Emenes, he likes to play in the enemy mid laner's face. So I think their style is much more pressure mid lane now than it was last year.
All right, thanks for that. I also had a little bit of research I did on Cloud9 and CLG, and this was more of a point about how consistently good C9 has actually been all the way since 2013. So if you look at this graph over there, Cloud9's the blue one, CLG is the white, and it's basically their standings from 1 to 10 at the end of the regular season. So you can see there's only that one dip where C9 actually still managed to make it into the World Championship through the gauntlet.
Oh, I remember that!
Yeah, really? so is Jensen.
2018 summer hits, they're always towards the top. And then I just think it's interesting to look at because you see CLG was so strong for so many years and has really only recently recovered from that, you know, horrendous 2020 to 2021 stretch.
Yeah, and I mean, it just took, because initially last spring, they weren't doing so hot either. It kind of took bringing Dhokla in to the top lane to kind of round out that roster and have this two-pronged attack between their solo laners and then a solid carry and Luger in the bot lane.
And it just feels so good to have that brand of CLG back successful again. Because me, when I started watching the league, I was actually just a CLG fan. Like, a lot of it was based off of like, oh, Hotshot GG, like Chowster, like Double-Lift, or like they had a lot of top laners, obviously.
How are you doing with the spice, by the way? I'm
much better now. Obviously, everything is still burning, but I can talk. So that's good. Wow. So it's nice to have that brand back so you can actually now dip into the history of the team when they're back successful again. And you kind of feel the gravitas of their successes. Like the players kind of know the value, or at least like how strong the brand is, where in the past when they've been losing a lot, you know, there's not much to really talk about. So I think it does a lot of good. It's nice to see new faces, strong coaching staff, a lot of it that's brought them to where they are now with consistent rosters. So I love the comparison between C9 and CLG for that reason.
All right. I also have Jazz stats.
Okay,
But
I like
yesterday,
this.
Mark flamed me for not having an intro, so I've spiced up the intro a little bit.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah, let's see it. What's in it for Jazz stats? I have music and stuff. Come on.
this is awful.
Amazing. I can feel the effort that was put into this.
Yeah, that's it. That's the whole intro. It'll be better tomorrow. You need a place to grow. I can't go to 10 right away.
Nothing was better.
Yeah, it's gonna improve. Okay, we have Jensen here. It's C9 versus CLG. All of these are going to be related to either C9 or CLG. So did you know that C9 has had 9 different mid laners start in their history?
Oh.
Okay.
Really?
9 different mid lane names. There's
Oh, what?
Incarnation,
That's awesome.
Jensen, Golden Glue, Niski, Perks, Fudge, Diplex, Emenes, and Hai, obviously. So of these 9 mid laners, who has averaged the most kills per game in a C9 uniform?
Kills per game.
Over the course of a split, or
No, just in any time.
historically?
It's their total C9 average.
Okay, it has to be Emenes.
The most
You used a very specific kills per game.
kills per game.
That's Emenes.
Okay, Raz says Emenes. Emily?
Small. I am also thinking you go into a small sample size.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember if Fudge had a lot of kills. It feels like he
Yeah.
didn't because he was playing a lot more supportive mids. So it's probably Diplex or Emenes. I'll go
Interesting.
Diplex to split
Yeah.
the difference. Just because
Jensen, what do you
whenever you look at like super insane stats,
Yeah.
the less time, the more ridiculous they are.
Okay.
I think this is a tough one. My heart says Jensen, but I feel like it's not gonna be him.
Why wouldn't it be you?
I mean, you have a fair point. It should.
Is it
be.
Incarnation instead? Let's check this out. No one got it, actually,
Wait.
except for Jensen.
Huh?
The answer is Jensen.
Ooh.
Okay,
The
nice.
least is Emenes. You know who's second place?
Incarnation.
Incarnation.
That's
You're
crazy.
the top 2 of every mid laner for C9.
Nice.
I'm
Wow.
impressed.
Yeah, Emenes is actually
Congrats.
the lowest, so that's part of it. He only has 26 kills in 10 games, so 2.6 kills per game.
All right.
Jensen, you're up
Okay.
at 4.5.
Wow.
Just so you know.
Not bad. Not
Next question, still about the C9 mid laners history. We're talking about solo kills per game. Most and least.
Oh.
bad.
Most and least.
Yeah.
Least, I think, is Fudge, because he's playing
Okay.
supportive, but also he's learning the role.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Same.
All right, most
Solo kills, huh?
Most
Yeah.
solo kills.
per game.
Okay, I'm gonna say Emenes again.
Okay.
One of these names has to
He
be
has the
Emenes.
lowest kills, but you think he has the most solo kills?
I don't think Emenes has the most.
You said
solo
per
kills.
game,
Per
too.
game? Yeah.
I think it's Emenes as well.
There it is.
Really? Wow. Okay.
I mean, that's it. You need it is Emenes, correct.
Wow.
Least is Golden Glue.
All right.
But second and third most least was Jensen and Incarnation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is where the small sample
Scaling.
size comes in.
He
Okay.
doesn't kill people. You didn't kill people in lane, but you always kill people.
I'll outscale him.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Yeah, he has a lot of kills to catch up. Okay, more towards the rest of the matchup. So, who in the game today has the highest death percentage for their team? Do you know what death percentage is, Jensen? It's just percentage of your team's deaths.
I would say, yeah. I'm
Oh
gonna guess.
my God, I know
This
this
has
one.
to be
I think-
Emenes. Just because of last week.
Who has the
what I-
highest
But
death percentage?
it could be CLG or C9, right?
Whole
Yeah,
split?
it could. Yeah, whole split. In the games that they have played, obviously.
I'm gonna go Blaber. Because he's like, Emenes just hasn't
Okay.
had that many
That's a good guess.
games.
Yeah.
Emily?
I'm gonna go Poome
Okay.
from CLG.
Really good answers.
Oh, God, I thought we were
Let's
still
reveal
talking
it.
about C9.
That's a real. It could be CLG as well. Let's roll it.
Let's roll it.
Roll
I
the
messed
answer.
up. I should have said CLG.
It is
Emenes
Emenes.
again.
Blaber was close.
Yeah.
Blaber was like 26, Dhokla was like 25.
Okay.
So it was really close. It's crazy that over 50% of their deaths are Blaber and Emenes. It's because Berserker never dies. He has like 18 deaths.
Yeah, I was gonna say
True.
Fudge doesn't die that often. Berserker
Okay.
doesn't die that often. Zven doesn't die that often.
Which player leads these two teams in damage percentage? The percentage of their team's damage.
Oh, this can't be a C9.
It's been an 80 carry meta, right? Mid
They
laners
have
do
too many
pump up
carries
damage
on that
though.
team.
You don't think it could be Berserker?
I was thinking about that, but it feels like
Potential MVP.
there are too many
Berserker.
carry players. It's either Jayce Fiora top lane or Emenes playing. I feel like there's too many
Damage percent.
players pumping damage on that team.
All
Because I feel like
I said
it's
these
not
reasons. I
Luger.
need to give you a hint. All of you guys
Yes.
think this player is better than the community thinks this player is.
Palafox.
Bam!
Yeah, that's it.
That
Palafox.
maybe too good of a hint, but I
mean,
wouldn't
it's a
have-
very
I
good
was
hint.
wondering.
Yeah.
I was wondering if the
We had
ASL
to get
damage
something.
would just skyrocket his damage share.
I
because
think that's what happened.
A lot of times, Luger has played like a Kalista or something, right? Not like a more
Yeah, the Seraphine
traditional
game
kind of
too.
hyper carry.
Yeah,
Oh, I forgot about the Seraphine game.
Anyway, congrats, Jensen, on having all those C9 records.
true.
Yeah.
I'm the real winner here.
Incarnation
True.
a little slack.
Yeah,
but
actually, you won the game and you're the subject.
I did
matter of
find
the
it
game.
really interesting how, like, just the stats tool I had wasn't grouping Jensen and Incarnation together, how similar the stats were.
Yeah, it's almost like it's the same
It's
player.
the same person, but it was like 9 years ago, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, consistent. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
A lot should have changed, but maybe
I mean, maybe it didn't.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about Palafox and how he's underrated by the community. It's really interesting to compare, because again, I think we're all coming into this thinking C9, obvious favorite,
Yeah.
not just because they're #1 team, but because of how dominant they've looked and because of how comparatively CLG kind of look a little bit inconsistent. The all-pro comparison between these two teams is none.
Yeah.
There's-
First team,
there's-
second team, first team, second team.
Of this
snub,
entire
snub.
team,
Yeah.
they don't have anyone who's ever made an all-pro lineup.
Well, they.
Oh,
Ever?
or
No,
I
sure.
feel like
It's just-
Contractz.
just this-
Yeah,
Yeah.
Contractz must have in the past, right?
Yeah, and so like one
Yeah,
name that's
okay.
popping out is Palafox, who
Yeah.
had a very consistent split in wins and losses, whereas it was just a really inconsistent split for a lot of mid laners. You go down the line, and a lot of players have had like really rough patches throughout the split, and it feels like even in the wins, Palafox did really well. So I actually was wondering, because I went through some of the votes, and I know that Palafox had won a lot of votes from the broadcast team, but you were one of the rare notes that had Palafox voted. So, like, what was your thought process on Palafox as a player and why you voted him as second team? I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, there was a lot of inconsistency in mid lane specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And since I couldn't vote for myself,
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I mean, I thought he was one of the few players that stood out the most when it comes to individual performance. And yeah, I just thought he deserved to be up there. He doesn't make too many mistakes, and he's generally a pretty good laner and just a good player in general. So he has my vote.
There it is. We need the propaganda machine from
I know.
CLG. That's what needs to happen. I know.
They're trying. They're the only playoff team without anyone in All Pro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a big chip for their shoulders.
Hashtag Palafox was
around.
robbed.
I will say that I can understand the thought process of thinking that they are greater some of their parts where it's like as a team they're really they play the same style. They flex like Yone and all that, so it like makes it very easy. Last year they were flexing Akali, but obviously that's not relevant here. It's like as a team they mesh very well together, and team fights I think play quite well and have a greater understanding of how they want to play the game right from the start of the split, which makes sense since they remain together. So I think a lot of people just group them together and say, oh yes, they're just a great team, and I think they need to kind of shed that butt and really kind of shed a light on some of the players that are doing well. I know I mentioned Palafox. I think Dhokla was on a few third All-Pro teams, and people really, I think he's a great performer too.
And it's good that you bring up they stuck together because these two rosters actually know each other really well. There's only one player who's different in Emenes so here we see a familiar face.
Wait a minute.
2022
Whoa.
Cloud9 and 2022 CLG, and we'll flip them to the current one.
Wachoo!
Oh,
The
look,
colors
it's-
changed.
I know.
The jerseys.
Oh, what happened
9 of the 10 players are exactly the same. So not only are we talking about CLG, a team that stuck with their lineup and was like, okay, we're just going to continue to iterate on that because we feel like we haven't hit our ceiling. We also have C9 who only made one change with the other 4 players staying exactly the same.
Yeah, and I know that like I think for C9 there were some coaching changes, but just in general, like starting the split without really needing to go from the ground up has to feel like a breath of fresh air where you're like, okay, we just have to come in. Like, actually, you talk about that experience of like, because you've probably been a part of many lineups where you're like, oh, so it's just like a completely different roster.
Yeah, I mean, starting from scratch is it can be a bit frustrating at times because there's always like things that happen in the game where you're like, oh, I guess we haven't really had this conversation before. Whereas like if you kind of like run back the same team, or at least most of the same team, it's a lot easier because you all have the like same idea about what you think is the right or wrong way to play the game. So you kind of just have to fill one person in, and it's not that hard to just fill one person in. So I think C9 looks somehow more dominant than last year, which sucks to say, but yeah, it seems like they kind of have their identity figured out already. Didn't have to make too much of a change, obviously, but they're looking pretty good.
Yeah, and I think the identity that makes them look stronger is just their early game, right? And we also noticed like a big change when Emenes came in. So we have some of C9's stats with Emenes versus when they had Diplex, and even though they've lost 2 games with both, the individual mid lane was much more aggressive for them, and I believe these are team stats, even though the mid laners have changed. So they've spent 41% of their games with a major lead versus 30%. Their first tower percentage has almost doubled, their gold lead has increased, and they're getting a faster paced game with more combined kills per minute. So basically everything for Cloud9 has sped up with Emenes in there instead of Diplex.
Yeah, and I will say, like, the differences that I saw within the draft and how they played the game was Diplex, it looked like, was willing to take more losing matchups for the team, and was scaling a little bit more for the team, and was actually making more active plays. Like if they were looking for a top lane dive, he was there, even if he was losing experience for that. Like that happened a lot. And now resources are going mid, and also Emenes is obviously like playing better within the lane. That's always going to be the case. But it seems like the style in which they play the game is now influenced around mid jungle, which is actually a lot more comfortable for C9 in the past, where they've had Perks working with Blaber, and even Fudge, when he was learning the role, working with Blaber was still really easy because he's been on that team with him for so long at that time. So it was like, okay, it made sense that mid jungle worked really well, and it seems like they're back on that train.
And I brought this up in my Telestrator clip when we were looking at Contractz and kind of their early game against C9 in the game that they did win last week. But I think that has to happen again, right? Like if CLG are going to touch C9 in this matchup, because C9 are that dominant, because they get out to these early game leads, it's absolutely going to have to happen. I mean, primarily from jungle, but also mid jungle from CLG as well.
Yeah, and I really do think this is an interesting matchup because CLG should have a massive chip on their shoulder, and if they want to get the widespread recognition as a top team, they need to be able to break through and actually beat C9. Last year in playoffs, they were the only team to take C9 to 5 games.
True.
Yeah.
This year in the regular season, they beat C9. Jez is like cracking up a little bit, but it's true, right? There's a reason people do not consider them a top team. That's why they had 0 people in All Pro. That's why I believe all of us are going to be predicting C9 to predict the take the series.
We can fly predictions at any time.
You're
I'm pretty
assuming
sure we're,
too much.
We're
year would
unified.
mean so much for CLG, I think.
You're assuming a lot here.
I mean, I talked to Palafox. Yep. Whoa.
There's a 1 in there.
Raz is a 3-1. Okay. Raz is the most CLG favored person on this desk.
Mostly for the points that we mentioned, where they're kind of forced to be a little bit more creative in finding wins. Like when they played against C9 last, this is why people are probably gonna be a little pissed, because it's like, wait a minute, they beat C9 in a crazy way, basically. We've talked about how Contractz was ganking rapidly. One thing I wanted to make note of is actually Dhokla, where we saw him using Sion ulti mid. He found a timer bot lane. Like, unexpected ways is how it's gonna be done. Even the fans don't believe it.
Yeah, 83% of fans to 17% of fans. Shout out to the small 17% that are hanging out there.
The believers.
So obviously, those are our predictions. And as we get ready for game 1, Dhokla has a message for all of us who apparently don't believe in CLG.
I mean, they're the #1 seed, right? It's obviously going to be tough, but that's just more for us to prove. And whenever we're doubted, we just end up winning. So keep doubting us.
everyone to the LCS. It is time to get into our second playoff match of the split. We got Cloud9, we got CLG, we got Mark here too, and a little bit of extra me.
Yeah, I wonder if that went out to broadcast. That was a little surprising. But hello, everyone. I'm excited to bring C9 CLG. It's been a very interesting road to get here for both of these teams. With C9, obviously the roster swap, and CLG, this late season surge, makes it a very interesting matchup to me.
Yeah, despite a lot of the pieces being the same of last year, still a lot of new energy coming into this matchup. Before we do get into the action with the teams going into Champion Select, here's a look at CLG's comms from their charge of the standings last week.
At CLG, Mark and I have him at 7th, and Kobe has him at 6th.
How could you?
Twitter has him at 7th. We're right.
Yeah, true.
TSM, baby. CLG is not making it in.
CLG, I think, is actually in the roughest spot, just because I think they have a pretty.
They have the hardest
record.
schedule.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yep.
No flash.
So even if the cleanse is gone, they still have another get out of jail free card, and Emenes goes right.
Yeah, can we Nash and I wall them off? We need to go here. We need to go. Hit Nash. I'm gonna wall them off.
Can Sedgel too.
Yes. And then we turn on Sedgel, okay?
Yep. Finds the kill on Emenes again. And now they're actually going to start the Baron. Are they going to look for another turn here? Fudge is in the area.
They also have Palafox ready to ride the
Looking. Gragas. Go, Gragas. Yeah, looking Cho. Yeah, looking Cho. We do Nash after this?
Yeah, go Baron.
Yeah, we can.
Don't matter. They'll kill them both.
And
CLG makes their move. I like the beginning to that video. I feel like this is my retribution for doubting them all split long. They give me their first playoff series to cast. We'll see if CLG can do it, dropping hot into the draft here. You see a lot of jungle focus in yesterday's series, excuse me. It's continuing a little bit here. The Sejuani banned out, the Vi banned out, the Taliyah as well. Those were some of the champions that CLG was using in that run that they went on. Contractz absolutely crushed Cloud9 with Sejuani just last week.
The jungle position for both of these teams has been at the forefront of a lot of the storytelling, not just because Blaber on the Cloud9 side is already such a formidable jungler here in NA, but Contractz being a leader and making such a difference in the early game when he is completely unlocked. But Cloud9 definitely trying to shut that down a bit with the way they were taking those bans, and now getting into the lock-in of the draft. It's a Varus first for C9.
Like this pick for C9, they've made their name kind of on aggressive bot lanes. They've had the Kallistas, the Varuses. You saw in that kind of last week with the tiebreaker game, breaking out the Draven. Absolutely disgusting performance out of Berserker. They can flex this Varus pick between both Zven and Berserker to see exactly what the matchup's going to be. And it's something that makes C9's bot lane so dangerous. Berserker was #1 in CSD, of course, across the entire split for bot lane.
And even when looking at this past All-Pro, right, and Berserker maintaining that #1 spot, there were not necessarily doubters of him, but those that were hyping up some of the opposition within the league with all of the, Prince talk. But
it was a very close battle between the two of them. I think a lot of people's minds were swayed with that final game. I will admit that worked for me. You watch a 10-kill Draven, whatever it ended up being, you're like, all right, he's pretty good. But it was a very interesting battle between the two of them. And they clinched that one out, and now it'll be on Berserker to kind of continue that domination against Luger and Poome. Have quietly had a very good split themselves. I think a lot of the CLG guys went under the radar for the majority of the split. You heard us kind of talking about there because they just look so doomed, and it was a very close finish, but they ripped off 3 in a row to finish in the top half of the bracket out of nowhere.
And multiple CLG members acknowledging across several interviews that they recognize that sweetness, not just with them, but the rest of the squad. We're getting kind of a two-faced pick here.
The Jayce pick for C9 fans. You don't know if you love it or hate it. There was some games in the middle of the split where Emenes was absolutely crushing on the Jayce picks. They have also flexed it up to the top side for Fudge, who has had great performances. But just last weekend, Emenes set the single game death record on Jayce. To be fair, some of those were kind of worthless at the end where he was charging out of fountain and willing to die again. I appreciate that he's not a KDA player, but he did not have great Jayce games at the end of last week. Palafox also had an incredible Jayce game, so I do think it's a situation where it's both a pick for C9 that does work well when they're playing well, but also is a takeaway from CLG.
And instead, with that takeaway happening on the side of Cloud9, CLG bringing in a classic for Palafox in the mid lane with Sylas.
Sylas is interesting. It's fallen out of the meta a little bit, but with the Maokai locked away, people always talk about Sylas's win rate when playing against Maokai, getting one of the strongest teamfight ultimates in the game to be able to seal that one away. But it is something that can struggle a little bit in the mid lane. We'll have to see if that Jayce stays mid, how Palafox can actually pilot against it.
both of these squads reverting to picks that have played well for them, particularly in the early stages of the split, and now kind of bringing it full circle with that response to the Maokai being locked in for Cloud9. But bans coming through for the final moments of the ban portion of the draft, and of course we're still looking for a support on the side of Cloud9, as well as some additional bot lane action for Luger and Poome.
Yeah, slightly mismatched where CLG have grabbed their soul lanes early. C9 have a lot of flexibility other than the Maokai, which technically can be flexed around, but that's really the only thing that you know for sure is this jungle matchup. The Maokai taken into the Wukong to help lock him down when he tries to go in. Very annoying for Wukong to get on top of the back line, which is what he's so good at usually. And yeah, not surprised to see the Cho'Gath counterpick banned away from the Sion, something that's been very powerful this split.
And that was a pick that even before some of the changes came through in patches, you saw in the NACL, for instance, that counter pick being picked up, and then some additional strength offered to Cho'Gath to offset that Sion. So now banned away, so Cloud9 cannot bring that into this matchup. And Dhokla being serviced with that tank pick from the top lane that has worked well for the teams that have made it into playoffs.
Yeah, I think the top lane matchup is one that we haven't touched on too much, but both Fudge and Dhokla are players with enough flexibility, it feels like, to be two of the premier carry players in the LCS. I think people like Impact and Someday tend to lean a little bit more on the tank and weak side portion of their play. But for Fudge and Dhokla, they're both willing to slam down those carries, the Fioras, the Aurelias, these kinds of things that will make this a interesting matchup to see how it evolves. Right now, it's leaning towards the tank side, and we'll see if that's something where CLG has some extra wrinkles in their game plan, because they are going all in on the Luger train, which has been quite good for them at times this split.
When we're talking collectively about CLG, a lot of it is on Contractz, or when you have those big standout games from Dhokla when he does take those carries up top. But for the longest time, since bringing Luger and Poome into the CLG fold, they have been a focus, building upon the synergy they established when they were under the 100 Thieves banner, and now in the playoff contention that they're offering against Cloud9.
Yep, I saw them hovering it. Actually going to go for the Yone here, the counter pick coming in. We'll have to see where they end up putting that one. I assume that's going into the top lane, but we'll see if it's actually mid battle for him. And of course, they were hovering the Renata for Zven. That would very much align with their pushing bot lane identity, double range, a lot of early power combined with the Varus. But instead, it's the Heimerdinger coming back in. We've seen it resurge a little bit at the end of the season, and this is one of those extremely annoying bot laners who just gets prio the entire time, shoves you in, harasses you out, and gives Blaber the space to make plays around the bot lane.
As soon as Heimerdinger started coming back into the meta, you saw him popping up on that ban block, very reminiscent of the peaks during the previous season. But Cloud9 and CLG, when looking at the draft in its entirety, I think will have a very intriguing journey going from draft to draft, because they are very different in the ways that they can put their win conditions. What do you think of the way they've indexed in this particular game?
I love both these drafts. They're both a little crazy, but in a good way. Like for C9, obviously, they have been playing with prio all split long. Looks like the Jayce is actually going to Fudge's hands here, and we'll get the melee versus melee skill matchup in the mid lane. But I think it's something where they obviously love playing with prio to buy space for Blaber to go make the plays he wants to be in, look for counter ganks, look for invades, these kinds of things. CLG has way more of a scaling identity, both with the Sion Infinite scaling, Zeri as well. Sylas scales extremely well, and so it's about withstanding this kind of brutal early game that C9 has dominated the second round robin, and it's why they have surged up in everyone's power rankings, everyone's expectations. It wasn't just that they were 7-2, but those wins looked incredibly dominant.
And that's why that underlying level of analysis in this particular draft is that much more important. It's not just about going into scaling, it's having something to lean on if Cloud9 do run away with the early game, as they have done so often thus far this year. But Cloud9 and CLG getting into it on the Rift. So this game number one, Mark, is very much going to set a tone, I feel like, for what kind of day we are in for. Whether it's Cloud9 saying, we are the top seed, we won the tiebreaker, we love running over the early game, or if it's Cloud9 proving that scrappiness that they have executed upon in the past.
I think it's super interesting, like you're saying, both because CLG has been a very inconsistent team over the course of the split, and that might come through here where I think there's some games where they might steamroll, get steamrolled, and the next game's totally different. Who can say exactly? But I also think on a strategic level, like you're saying, this is that early game that you see out of C9 going up against the late game of CLG, and CLG does have the ability, if this game falls flat in its face, to later flip that script. And so I like this approach in a game 1 of a 5-game series, coming out with a very specific draft identity, but knowing that you have other things you can do depending on how this one goes.
And kind of on that note of CLG, what they're going to be bringing to the table and indexing into these tools that can flip things on later. I loved hearing from different players in certain interviews going into this, which I will dive into in a bit. For now, though, we got some live primetime action with the coaches standing by.
Thank you very much. I'm here with Mithy, head coach of Cloud9. How do you feel about the draft for game 1?
I think it should be good. Have pry on most lanes and good AP/AD spread, good damage against tanks, and they're running into us, and we have good champions when they run into us. So
yeah, the biggest question we had when we were watching the draft was the Jayce and whether that was going to be going top or mid. How was that conversation panning out? Did it depend on the 4-5 bans?
Yeah, I mean, of course, like it's just a flex pick. It's a pretty strong champion these days, so we just kind of decide and build around what they do. So yeah, I think this game, Gore Drinker Jayce, pretty strong. So
what does winning look like for this draft? How many lanes have to win for you to actually feel like you're comfortable in the game?
I think the only real way things get out of control is if we don't really have vision and then they just come from all angles, or they're like the Sion is really far ahead or something. But I feel like I don't really see the issue, really. I think we have enough like vision control with saplings and towers and stuff that shouldn't really happen.
All right, thank you very much. Good luck in the rest of the series.
Thank you.
Very interesting little tidbit there. Tilting his hand on what the Jayce is expected to build instead of going the Eclipse, going for a potentially Gore Drinker. It's the second most built mythic on him, and in a very engaged, heavy, short-range team from CLG, it could actually be a good pickup, but he's getting targeted early.
Has to flash out of the vicinity, but sees multiple members of CLG on his tail. Fudge waiting for the last hits. Blaber here to try and offer some assistance with some lockdown thrown on saplings going in. The charge up from Dhokla cannot connect with
Emenes?
Fudge, and Emenes looking for the angle, looking to collapse. The root onto one from Blaber. Emenes slinging on in there, hitting away with the Q, and what it do? First blood for Fudge.
Cloud9 showing that they are a little bit more coordinated as a team. Emenes with the early prio that he has against Sylas, able to move up to the top lane and collapse on that long play. I thought when Fudge flashed forward, that was the disaster waiting to happen, but he held his hammer form E until he got back on the right side here. This was so well played by him. Flash out of the queue. Initially, I'm like, okay, this looks doomed. I don't know why you flashed in that direction. Even with Blaber coming in from the river, I didn't think it would be enough, but had that E there to knock him back after Contractz flashed in, buys him the time to be able to get back on top of them. Blaber gets this slow knock back, and then because Emenes, this play was so slow developing, he had time to move all the way from the mid lane up here and get this kill onto Dhokla.
When talking about how Cloud9 has strength in this top side because of what Fudge can do as a player on aggressive picks, on more team-oriented picks, part of that conversation is the way Blaber and the rest of the teams respond. Oh, Fudge right across mid side, though, running into some danger once again. The kill thrown back to CLG.
God, this is going to be a good series. I feel it already, that both teams so proactive here. I was about to comment on the fact that C9, with these flexible lanes and the flexibility of their players, the fact that Fudge actually played mid last split, that he was going to stay mid on the Jayce here, I thought that was really intelligent, but CLG, no. Hey, he has no flash. They're trying to hide the flashless Jayce from the long lane topside, and so they put him mid, and CLG instantly goes, we don't care if it's a shorter lane, we're still gonna attack and kill you.
Just the scrap that we're getting right off the top, Mark. Definitely looking forward to how this evolves throughout the game. I mean, one thing to consider is Cloud9 very much wanting to index into some of that early pressure, so CLG are able to offset that with a match of their own right across mid as Palafox falling low. Then that's where the pressure lies on them to be able to uphold a good stance against the aggression. Poome getting marked down. It's all across the map.
Yeah, just scrapping everywhere, very hard to keep pace, but it is a situation where Palafox with his TP advantage, that Emenes had to use that after roaming top, can kind of sustain some of these trades, just sit under his turret. This is how Sylas usually plays the melee versus melee matchups early on. Doesn't actually have the power to usually win 1v1s, and so you're focused more on surviving. Luger, able to get out there. But yeah, I really like how CLG has kind of attacked this, because even though Fudge got that first blood, he actually fell behind in CS because he then went mid, then got killed again. He was out of lane for a little bit of time. He is catching it up now as Dhokla does take his first recall. So he's going to be A-okay, but it is a gold lead that was very easily closed back out. You know, C9 is expected to get a gold lead with this comp. It's a question of how much do you need when you start hitting the 15-20 minute mark and team fights start coming in that you can actually still beat CLG.
Because they know how to swing that gold lead around once they do establish it. So good on CLG to try and offset some of that momentum building for the side of Cloud9. But as we expect, having that melee across mid lane, so getting some bow back and forth here. Zven on the Heimerdinger will be executing as much as possible along Berserker to keep the pressure up on Poome and Luger. Poome very much indexing into a pick that will offer a lot in that CC later on in the game.
That's just one of those horribly annoying lanes to play against. There's just projectiles flying at your head every second. There's turrets being thrown down. Varus E and Q, the Heimerdinger E and W, just always having to dodge out, keep your footwork good, and it's a matchup where if you can actually dodge out a lot of that damage, you can survive it and keep that CS up. They're down about 10 right now on the Zeri. I wouldn't be surprised to see him fall down a little bit more, but you should have the scaling advantage in theory.
Yeah, because in the end, no major gold lead is established thus far, just at the 250 mark for Cloud9. This prio over on the bot side, though, does mean some pressure on the Dragon right now for Blaber as Zven and Berserker keep up the poke.
Not a surprise at all to see them transition this early bot pressure into the Dragon, like we're kind of calling out. It's something that C9 has been very good about doing. You know, even if they're not getting all the kills that they want or the lanes aren't getting solo kills, the fact that they draft this high tempo style allows them to then go start snowballing neutral objectives. And Blaber has been one of the least proactive junglers in the LCS. He's been a little bit better in the second half of the season playing with Emenes, but the team does use his efficient style to focus more on clearing camps, and with the changes to the counter jungle, that's a buff to Blaber's style, and it's very much about getting these kinds of leads and him being at the right place at the right time to counter gank rather than blow leads open.
Exactly, Fudge MVP, I thought he was good. On that point, something that you were all discussing on the dive, and I know that Jat was saying specifically how part of Blaber's efficiency comes from the threat that he offers as jungler, someone who is always able to keep up that pressure in the enemy jungle, in the lanes, where CLG are forced to respond to the looming threat that he constantly poses.
Exactly. I mean, look at this vision line that you have from the side of C9 here. There's no idea exactly where Blaber could be in the entire bot side of the map. You can see assist me pings because they're not exactly sure where he is. It's very hard to get advanced vision to spot Blaber out when you're playing with this much prio in every lane like C9 likes to do. And that speaks to Jat's point about, like, well, Blaber could be anywhere and you just assume he's always there because he's so smart.
Which means because of that pressure just through sheer vision, they're able to offer on that bot side after taking that Dragon. Blaber can be here on the top side to try to make the pay. Palafox going in onto it on Blaber, though, stunned away. And a double knock-up. Emenes over the wall. He goes. Multiple ults utilized. Contractz burn on down. Palafox soon to follow. Ends up flashing out of it. Fudge getting a channel over here onto Dhokla, who wants to escape, but it's a split up of the fight. Multiple lives lost. The 2-for-1 trade as CLG go on the retreat.
Dangerous to try and fight C9 early at these neutral objectives with the power of their comp. It was a cool idea to try and hop on Blaber and kind of cut the play by getting a 2-on-1 on him before the rest of C9 showed up, but it was just a little too slow to finish off Blaber. You can see here he's kind of caught in the river, and they're saying we can get a pincer on him, especially with stealing the Maokai ultimate. But it takes a little bit too long to lock him down. That gives time for Emenes to get in range. Zven is also already on the move. The fact that they were not quite able to finish him off quickly, and I like that C9 kind of played this slow, both Blaber and Emenes trading off who was being focused down at different points in time until Zven could finally show up. Poome shows up as well, but just a little bit too late, because also during this time, Fudge was kind of winning that trade in the river against Dhokla and forced him back, so, you know, there was no chance for CLG to realistically win that fight after they committed.
The responsiveness of the members of Cloud9 are so dangerous in those moments. That bit of a delay in the potential lockdown on Blaber, enough time for the rest of Cloud9 to respond, and now this grabbing the Rift Herald as a result of that previous 1-for-2 skirmish, and 1.1k gold lead for Cloud9 as they approach 10 minutes. Poome right here with Blaber has Luger over the side to make the escape.
He was trying to bait the Blaber W on top of him, and then E back over the wall to pull him over, maybe deeper than Blaber wanted to go. Blaber too smart to fall for that play, though. A cute little move, but already bot laners moving into the mid lane. Both teams have very good 1-3-1 options, and kind of going into that at 10 minutes into the game, potentially trying to set up a good angle for a roam with the prio that they should get mid lane down to one of these side lanes. You drop a Rift Herald. It's kind of the same way you would often try and get mid prio and then make that play happen when your bot lanes are actually bot lane, but a little bit easier to make happen potentially with how strong Varus Heimer is. See, they can just always clear these waves instantly.
And looking at some of the potential strength on the other side, one of the members in the most danger. Palafox right now is the one holding 2 kills, is the one building in to be a threat later, but sees that Cloud9 are ready to collapse upon him if necessary.
Yeah, I think they're calling this one out because they lost sight of Poome, and Dhokla does have his teleport back available. It's something that could easily turn to a very scrappy fight, but that's exactly the play that I was highlighting, that C9 is going to threaten over and over and over again, and eventually you hope that you can get enough advanced warning to know that there's an actual strong side of the map for you there. They backed off there, but they still get a blue buff seal out of it, so a very successful usage of this tempo that they have. It's really, really good stuff to see. It's somewhat bread and butter in competitive League of Legends to be able to use your mid prio to take over a side of the map, but a lot of teams still struggle with syncing up all their players, and C9 have been so in sync this entire split.
Very much leans into the idea that junglers and mid laners need to be on the same page on a team, so there's so much more emphasis when Blaber was specifically calling for Emenes to join this squad and be able to execute that pressure and throw it across the map.
It's his preferred playstyle. We all know that Blaber, at his best, is playing Udyrs, Hekarims, Olafs. He's running in your face. He's murdering you over and over again. And that's hard to do if you don't have pressure in the mid lane, or at least someone who's willing to scrap out with you. And Emenes definitely brings that more aggressive playstyle. It's what I'm sure attracted him to Emenes when they had that kind of conversation about what's gone on. They're both pretty blunt people, it sounds like. They just, you know, Blaber just asked straight up, what's up with the rumors around your toxicity, you know, and they just hashed it out and realized that this was someone that saw the game the same way. And you can see that has helped transform the team in how they approach with this super high tempo style.
There's so many pieces of content where Emenes has been asked exactly that, but still maintains a lot of levity and good synergy both on the Rift and off of it with the rest of Cloud9 as they drop this Rift Herald across mid. Very great place and very standard to be able to drop it, especially ahead of the dragon as the fight starts to break out. Contractz going in, and Maokai throwing the ultimate in response. A charm onto one, and the laser coming through for Zven, so he has to flash out of it. And off from the side, Berserkers get the damage down. One hail to get the kill onto Poome, and Contractz has way too many blue lines on the pursuit of his own body, separating him from the fight. It's the one for double trade again, but Cloud9 executing well.
Cloud9 able to survive that initial engage by CLG. The fact that Palafox with the stolen Yone ultimate means that there was not quite enough damage to insta-kill Blaber yet again. The second time they tried to target him out early, Blaber does end up dropping, which slows this dragon takedown. So we'll see if both teams end up resetting. Contractz will be up soon, and they might fight again. They did get a lot of chip damage with that Rift Herald charge. They tried to drop that early to get, you know, this kind of inward path from mid lane to the river, and they had it, but Blaber was a little bit ahead of the rest of the team here, and if he can actually land that with a very nice W untargetability onto the Rift Scuttle Crab to get out of Palafox's engage there, meant that Blaber lived long enough that it gave C9 time to turn around. They blow Poome up, and Contractz does finish the kill off, but he's isolated from the rest of his team to make that play happen.
And in the end, it was enough of a scrap to end the play around Dragon, whichever team that ends up falling better for when the engage comes around the next time. About to get past that 14-minute mark. So Cloud9 previously at 2K, now to 1.5. Got some decent plates off of mid with that drop from the plates before they fall. And now get a little bit of a reset.
Yeah, you can see it's interesting that they went back for lane assignments action instead of just rushing straight back down to the dragon. I thought it was going to be an instant reset. Instead, they try and get the wave shoving again before they do it. But Palafox in some trouble here.
Wanted to find a moment to push this up, but now flashing in response to Emenes going in with the ultimate, but Blaber again here to lock him down. The lock with the golden, but Palafox can't get to Poome quick enough until the final blow comes from Emenes, and Poome, the sacrifice to follow for Cloud9. Getting the victory in that engage.
Oh, Palafox just stepping a little bit too far forward in lane. C9 with the inside trap from River, cut him off. That's 2 kills. Luger wants something though.
Trying to get something here. Emenes falling pretty low to the lathering bolts of Luger, so a pick-up kill from CLG while Cloud9 take their second Drake of the game.
Good of them to find a cleanup kill there and stop the pressure from the bot side. Of course, Berserker will shove in mid lane, grab this first turret of the game. During this time, though, you saw Contractz focused up on this top side with Dhokla, forced Fudge out of the lane. They're going to trade a turret back. So a 2,000 gold lead right at 15 minutes for C9. Not a bad spot to be in for their comp, but they're not 100% out of the woods yet. Unfortunately, the dragon stacking in isn't in their favor.
Dragon stacking and most gold into Berserker's pocket right now for Cloud9.
Shocker. Always seems to be
surprise.
ahead, yeah. We see an Anathema's Chains pick up by Blaber here. This was something that, watching it last series and always watching Inspired as an Anathema Chains enthusiast, I was just amazed at how strong this item is, watching double try and play through it. And it's something where I expect this item to be picked up a lot more as playoffs go on. And we're in these kinds of games where there's one major threat that you're most concerned about here. It's the Zeri. I assume that's who he's going to attach it onto. Yes, of course, there's other people that dive on, but if you can lock down the Zeri insta-killer at the start of fights, it's very hard for CLG to win. So I have been converted. I am very hot on Anathema's Chains.
Definitely gets more value when it comes to exactly what you were saying. A lot of these comps just having that single target that you really need to remove right off the bat for the most damage. Blaber getting caught right here in the line bush though, the responding rune, but ends up falling to the hand of Palafox. So CLG around this second Rift Herald should be able to pick it up.
They've tried 3 times around neutral objectives in a row to cut the play off, kill Blaber early. They finally execute on that play. Absolutely massive to get his kill there because it allows them to grab this Rift Herald. As we see Palafox in some trouble.
The play made on the opposite side. Palafox's sacrifice for the rest of the team focusing that Rift Herald.
C9 are just so fast-paced. As soon as they realize that there's no way to fight this Rift Herald, they're instantly down on the other side of the map. Emenes had teleport to contest that Rift Herald if they needed to. Realizing that they can't do it, Berserker actually moves down to the bot lane to find an early kill on him. Very well done.
More pressure here across mid. The Herald pretty quickly dropped after grabbing it to get that charge across mid. They knew it would take a little bit of time for Cloud9 to potentially respond.
Yeah, feels like a bit of a mistake though. I think they thought that they had the numbers advantage mid to instantly take that turret down, but Jayce, and Zven, and they were just able to get enough damage down to CLG that they actually couldn't push.
A lot of it is because of Cloud9's swiftness and not just responding to make that play down bot, but really be in tune with one another. Every time there's a VOD review, every time we get to hear that insight of how Cloud9 executes, it never feels like a mistake or an accident for them to be where they are. They're always thinking a few steps ahead, as was made clear in those moments. But CLG, even though they're dropping that down pretty quickly, they do still get the charge. They do still get some value from that Rift Herald.
Yeah, it's a little bit of value, but I think from their position down this gold, any way that you can get this injection would be huge to just keep you in punching distance of C9, and you don't realistically need chip damage, so it does feel like a little bit of a wasted opportunity there, but I think that just speaks to C9's defense being very good, and they're instantly back on the map making plays.
Oh, following over the wall onto Poome, who has to get out of there as quickly as possible towards the turret. Dhokla now the subject of the gaze of Fudge and the rest of Cloud9, but enough of a wave and more. Poome getting out of there enough with the ultimate.
The rest of C9 is stacking in the brush though. CLG is bringing reinforcements, Palafox moving in. It will be hard for them to fully defend this. Even if they can group up, it's still probably going to get knocked down by the range and chip damage of C9. We'll see if Fudge and them try, or might actually have scared them off.
A lot of fight over vision there, and Cloud9 making sure to keep their controls at the ready so that Dhokla and the rest of CLG have difficulty pushing up from that position. And also worth noting as we see these rotations across the map, Emenes with a bit more freedom to do so with a teleport. Still a bit of time before Palafox's comes on through.
Yeah, Palafox has been getting picked on a little bit this game, but he's someone who has there's been a number of players on CLG who people have debated who should get the All-Pro nod. The fact that they got none, you heard talked about in the Analyst Desk, despite being the 4th place team in the LCS. It's like they really didn't have anyone who was top 3 in their role. And I think Palafox was one that a lot of people in the community had identified as someone who was very important in CLG's wins, maybe one of the more consistent members, as Poome is deep behind enemy lines. Doesn't know it yet.
Whoop, sees one enemy, sees another coming soon over the wall, and Emenes coming through with the ultimate. A little too much red in his eyes as soon as he hops on over.
It was a cute idea, but ultimately not able to find the kill there. A little bit of pressure, but because he lost his ultimate and committed it there, I don't think CLG are too worried about this from here. And Palafox can keep trying to scale up. We talked about the scaling of Sylas being quite strong. It's just going to get better as they keep getting the ultimate stolen from Maokai. Now above level 11. Going to be very scary in this team fight coming up around the Chemtech Dragon.
Yeah, setting up for it 5 seconds to go before it spawns, and Cloud9 getting their sweepers and warding at the ready. Teleport in from CLG's side.
Oh boy.
To ensure that Dhokla can engage if necessary.
A lot of flanks.
Cloud9 starting up onto the dragon. They know that Poome is here, and Emenes wants to zone him off. Fudge coming through as well. There's the ultimate from Blaber, the stun and more, and the knockback onto Dhokla and the squad. Berserker getting marked so low by Contractz though. Contractz isolating the target very effectively. Cloud9, no one here to make their stand. CLG bullying him out of the pit.
Excellent flanks by CLG coming in from all different directions. There was no ultimate on Emenes, like I was saying. It made it a very difficult fight for C9 to actually look for. And CLG did a good job this game staying within punching distance. Like we said, it was never more than the 2,500 gold lead that allowed them to find this fight. They killed multiple members. Now they're on to Baron. We'll have to see if the poke from Fudge and Emenes now back with his ultimate, if he can TP in here, maybe stop this.
Needs to get some way of gaining sight over on this Baron play from CLG.
So
Emenes
slow.
here, stepping up to it. Fudge wanting to line, hits the Q back. Emenes goes in, knocks out multiple on the backside. Poome to fall, and Baron goes down, secured by CLG.
Pretty clean escape there by CLG. Got very dicey with a fat ultimate from Emenes, but they only killed Poome. The smite was still alive for Contractz. Ice in his veins, grabs that Baron, and they get out with 4 members alive. So very nicely played there by CLG.
Still a lot of purple for them to work with. It's not just about securing the Baron, it is on the way they were able to exit. So CLG now starting to whittle even more into that gold lead. 1.2K for Cloud9. What are you feeling about where these two teams are standing at this mark?
I think if I'm CLG, I'm feeling great with so many turrets left on the map to get some gold with. Here's that flank that we're talking about. They do such a good job of isolating them right here. Palafox hops the wall, the chain CC. Contractz doesn't get focused down on the rest of the team. He actually makes sure he gets onto Berserker and finishes him off. Meanwhile, Emenes and Fudge were just not grouped up and didn't have a way to contribute to that team fight. So just very split focus there.
Oh, and coming back into it.
Oh, Zven immediately jumped on again.
Was going through the jungle, and too many of CLG there to punish. So Cloud9 currently at the loss of their support, but CLG really stepping into the driver's seat on this one and still have over a minute and a half to work with this Baron buff to start picking up some of that standing gold on the map.
Yeah, nice pick off there onto Zven, trying to get some vision out. It's very difficult to play Heimerdinger from behind. You have to have very good footwork to avoid just getting blown up because you are so squishy. They are able to grab some of this objective down, but I think C9 did an okay job splitting the map. You saw Emenes forced Dhokla up there to grab that, but here we go, getting some gold back in their pocket. Gold lead close even with a scaling advantage in CLG's pocket. The Dragon stacking also has been stopped. The fact that they were able to get that Chem Tech is huge because otherwise you might be looking at soul point for C9. So CLG are feeling great. Obviously understand how their team wants to team fight from here.
I imagine this was a big turning point for them, being able to gain a lot of confidence in what this comp is supposed to bring to the table and preparing for the team fights ahead where things will feel much more even-keeled than some of their earlier engaged attempts by Cloud9.
And I think it's what makes CLG so impressive as a team is even when they take scaling options, that doesn't make them passive in the early game. We saw 3 straight objective fights. They tried to pick off Blaber at the start of them. It didn't always work. It was a little scary because that is giving a little extra gold. I think a lot of people see the risk reward there and say, oh, well, if we just don't fight them, they can't get any kills at this neutral objective. But CLG is saying, well, if we kill them, it stops their stacking even faster. Their snowball gets shut off even faster. And so I appreciate that CLG, even when they have scaling in their favor, doesn't just let off the gas completely. And you can see finally they landed the fight that worked for them, and now they're in complete control of this game.
Looking to land another fight. Palafox having the stolen ultimate from Berserker does not connect, but Cloud9 feeling more and more pressure, so they feel the need to turn this back onto Dhokla, who uses the unstoppable onslaught to get the heck on out of there back into the riverside. Fudge now isolated by Poome and Contractz. Look how fast that burn down is getting easier and easier to kill off members like Fudge.
CLG looked like they were done making plays after the Palafox stolen Varus ultimate whiff. They forced Dhokla back. Fudge is trying to rotate, but the extra distance from the Chem Tech blast cones gave Poome and Contractz the range they needed to find that kill. That also gives them pressure now to keep chipping down this mid turret.
After giving plenty of props to Cloud9 for their responsiveness across the map, got to give it to CLG as well. The reach there from Emenes cannot prolong for long enough to get Dhokla out of there, but yeah, CLG completely eliminating the gold lead that C9 had established.
Oh my god, Emenes is relentless.
Again, yeah, says I'm gonna get this on take 2. Still slamming away onto Dhokla, eventually slaying some back.
I wonder if Dhokla will try and recall in lane 10 feet away again. Looks like it.
I wonder.
My brother, please walk further back.
Will he?
Oh, okay, he's out.
Okay.
If Emenes just continued running forward, he would have caught him out there. A little cute interaction between the two of them. But yeah, CLG's still feeling good. I think the thing that really makes their team comp so good in the mid to late games is the stability of it. The fact that C9 has a lot of damage that actually continues to scale through the game. Obviously, Jayce is no joke late game. Yone is no joke late game. Even a Varus can contribute quite a bit. And so if C9 can find a good angle where CLG fails and engage, they can still win these team fights. But the problem is there's so much engage, there's so many people who can get exploded on C9 side that just any one of these abilities lands, whether it's Poome or Contractz or Dhokla or even Palafox with a stolen Maokai ultimate. There's so many ways to lock down the squishy members of C9. They're still going to take this fight.
We're starting to see inklings of it, and maybe CLG will throw down that lockdown in this fight over the Dragon. Already burned below 4, but going to get reset here. Cloud9 continued to hover around the river. They have to be worried about those flanks that CLG had executed on previously. Contractz looking for a similar angle, wants to find Berserker again, gets a knock-up onto Berserker and Zven, but the rest of the team getting charmed and locked up around the Dragon side. It's Contractz this time that's the first to fall, so Cloud9 get the chance to wrap it around for another Dragon of their own.
C9 had such a better setup that time in the Dragon Pit. They had wards all over the wall. They had Emenes hopping over walls to force Palafox back, and it ends up in a situation where only Contractz is alone on the back line. They did a good enough job stuffing the engage that C9 could focus him down, get the kill, and then grab the objective.
And it is those similar ideas as the previous fight, but those differences. A bit better warning for Cloud9 this time. Not as much support on the lockdown onto Berserker from Contractz and the rest of CLG, and this time going over in the blue side favor.
Yeah, I think this is what makes C9 a very scary team, is that they adapt in the game. They don't just try the same thing over and over again and hit their head against the wall. They learn from their mistakes. Last time we gave them way too many angles, we weren't grouped up. Here they did a really good job of getting everyone in the same position to actually fight, kind of front to back. And it was so well fought, actually, that Berserker didn't even have to blow his flash. These are still up for the next time that they actually have to square off, because that's one of the huge cooldowns that CLG needs to be tracking, is if we can force the flashes out of the squishy members of their backline, it's a lot easier to finish them off.
We might be approaching another opportunity for these teams to come head-to-head on the Rift. And that's just going and getting some intel to sling on forward to see how many members of CLG are lurking. And those adaptations are so clear, because even when things did work out for Cloud9 in the earlier moments, a lot of times Blaber was the first executed. He gets out that Nature's Grasp right before falling, and it's just enough. And then now being positioned in a way where CLG's focus on taking down the jungler around these objectives isn't as much as a viable opportunity. Can't capitalize on the burn down on Berserker quick enough, and things are still close.
Yeah, things are very close. The fact that they got that Dragon does turn the option for Soul Point back in their favor to keep kind of the scaling closer between the two teams. And C9 grabbed the gold lead back as well. The fact that they never broke that mid turret with a Baron feels pretty bad on the side of CLG. They are a very short-range comp, so it is hard to actually siege down. And they do a good job finding picks and jungles, but they really need to actually start finding ways to grab objectives. Palafox starting to hurt.
Yeah, getting a decent chunk out of Blaber there, but since it was only a couple members of CLG, they don't want to commit to anything there just yet. Kind of see that Cloud9 are continuing to establish their vision around this mid side. Contractz a bit worried about who might be lurking beyond that bush.
Still forces the ultimate out. He saw the Soul untethered and knew where the snap pack was going to go to, so he just stealths up on top of him. You know, Emenes doesn't know exactly how many people are around, has to burn the ultimate defensively, relieve some pressure from CLG here as C9 is starting to set up their Baron control.
And for Cloud9, Fudge does have that teleport available down for everyone else, soon to come back up for Palafox, but he's already in the vicinity on this top side with Baron up. Next major objective to be fought over, but so much of it has been who finds the better flank angles, and it's difficult from the current positioning.
I think this is mostly just posturing from the side of C9. They realistically don't want to start Baron 5v5 alive with how squishy they are, the flank concerns like you're talking about. This is mostly to corral CLG, posture enough to make them have to respect it. If they misstep, maybe you land some poke and you can actually get a kill, but it's mostly about controlling the next 2 minutes of the game until the Dragon spawns, and then you can actually go for that win condition, because it's a lot easier and lower risk to push onto that as opposed to onto the Baron.
Yep, exactly right. There's nothing currently pulling to the opposite side of the map and having those neutrals up. When you are the team for Cloud9 on Soul Point, there's much more of a threat that you offer when trying to go for that Dragon in a minute and a half or so into the future. But CLG also posturing up on their own mark, pushing the waves back across mid, made sure to be moving as units throughout the jungle so they didn't get locked down by Blaber or any of Cloud9 members. You still have to be worried about the sapling setups and the like around these objectives.
Yeah, it's a very annoying comp to kind of face check into, both the poke from Varus, the saplings, like you said, the poke from Jayce, even Heimerdinger dropping turrets, and you have to kind of face check and clear them. It is a team where if C9 gets set up first, there's a lot of work that CLG has to do to get into position. It's also why flanks are so powerful, because you don't have to just face check through all of that. But C9 has done a very good job of kind of wrestling control back after that initial Baron attempt. They're again a minute ahead of time, flipping that control from the Baron side to the Dragon side, getting their wards down, getting these turrets down, and making it so that CLG is going to have to fight through a couple different choke points to actually make it happen. CLG saying, screw that, we're going to flip you for Baron potentially, and that's another valuable option that you can have is, you know, is your scaling good enough that you can give them soul point or a Baron and just get some more gold back in your pocket? C9 are kind of respecting it.
And draw out the teleport from Emenes to get here quickly. In case CLG do want to go for this posturing around Baron or try to get a collapse play upon Cloud9. Still going for that fight over vision here, as everyone from CLG are ready to find the angle, get a decent little poke onto Blaber, but nobody overstepping just yet.
No one overstepping just yet. Dragon has not yet spawned. We'll see exactly how much C9 are going to react to this Baron threat. CLG deciding to finally start it. C9 walking into River.
And Emenes zoning off Palafox, who's trying to find the angle through the jungle, but Cloud9, I think they're just looking at the way CLG is poking off on this. There's no true commitment just yet, looking on who's going to usher the start of this fight first. Palafox losing about 40% of his HP, same with Dhokla, so they have to wrap around the pit.
This is huge for C9. The fact they poked CLG off, CLG was kind of spotted the entire way. They didn't have a good flank angle, and C9 leaked out Emenes at the start of this to actually just take the soul by himself. Great macro out of Cloud9.
And now Cloud9, 4th dragon to their name, Chemtech Soul acquired. Much more pressure they can offer against CLG after really posturing so they could get that objective and just take it away.
This is such a cool game. The first 15 minutes was bloodshed, insanity, fighting all over the place. It slowed down a lot when C9 realized CLG were matching them beat for beat in the bloodshed angle, and so they go for a lot more control focus, and it's about getting these setups around these neutral objectives and just outwitting your opponent, having good lane assignments, and now they are monstrously ahead in terms of effective gold with the extra soul in their pocket, all the stacks, the fact that you also have just a gold lead on its own. Map control, C9 are looking good in game 1 right now.
A fighting game for the first half, and a bit more of a tactics game for the second half here.
Yeah, I'm not going to tip my hand too much which one I enjoy more, but if they wanted to get some more team fights, I wouldn't complain.
I wouldn't complain about, you know, some of that infuse me with what coffee would do. Oh, going in. There's some action right there. Immediate burn down of Poome. Let's see what Cloud9 could end up doing with this one. Emenes going in, the channel from Dhokla if he did remain too long, but Cloud9 decide to start up this Baron. 3 members onto it. Look at that burn, baby, burn. CLG can't do nothing in the 4v5, so they give up the purple crown to Cloud9.
Nice pick off by C9 there. Poome has been looking for these angles all game long and had been a couple of close encounters, but finally C9 finds him and early enough kill him. And without that extra engage, CLG is just saying, we don't have enough tools to realistically win this fight. So they back off, they give the Baron away. But it's really scary against how poke heavy this team comp is. The only real way to defend these turrets and stuff is going to be for CLG to find an angle to engage, because the range is so heavily in C9's favor here. Once Poome's back up, now that he's here, they're going to have to find a way to actually stop a push through an engage.
Got to be worried about the vulnerability of those melees on CLG as soon as Cloud9 comes and knocking. They've still got over 2 minutes to work with on this buff, so getting a chance to get back and then reset into these lanes to get some of these waves pushing up. You can see Fudge ushering over on that bot side. Some deeper wards from CLG that still have them somewhat covered, but you have to be wary of Berserker going along Blaber here throughout the jungle to change that.
Yeah, you can see CLG not even trying to cut through the jungle, knowing how much damage there is on the side of C9, sitting in lane and kind of waiting for them. That means that, of course, you're just going straight front to back. There's none of these flanks, so they're doing their best to clear these waves. C9 keeping the pressure up. Emenes staying mid lane. He's alone in that lane right now, so while they'll defend this inner bot lane turret, they're going to lose an inhibitor for the sake of it.
And going for the lockdown from Blaber just to keep CLG here. Multiple knockdown Poome into the back. CLG blasting around. They take 2, make that 3. Coming in hot on the bot push.
C9 are split pushing, and Dhokla baits them into thinking that they can actually go for that engage. Poome finds the monstrous 3-man engage, annihilates them. Fudge caught out a little bit here.
Whew. Contractz popping the watch. Fudge just wanting to buy time to get to safety. Doesn't have a turret here at the tier 2. Does blast down Contractz. Contractz, though. Now Poome and Luger can't stand up to Fudge.
Fudge destroying Contractz, who in that chase down sequence, there's actually no armor bought by Contractz. He's just relying on his passive there, and so Fudge just absolutely annihilates him.
And Emenes saying that Poome and Luger, you already lost out on that battle against Fudge. Do not come into my jungle. Emenes picking up a buff here, but CLG, that was quite swingy, just making the play happen there with that massive engage, and then a little bit of a chase down after.
Yeah, really nice by CLG to stop that push. The gold lead hasn't changed very much. You can see the Baron buff power play is 150 only, but they did get more map control because during the sequence, Emenes was pushing mid, but Poome, the monstrous 3-man engage, everyone immediately following up. Dhokla's ultimate, you saw the Zeri W coming in over the top, Contractz getting the knock up. A nice quick 3 kills. Overextending a little bit for trying to finish off Fudge. Finally, Contractz has some armor. I think he just straight up bought GA off just stopwatch. So nice to get some more defenses for him there, knowing that there is a lot of physical damage on the side of C9.
And C9 definitely looking to throw that physical damage at these turrets, and more Palafox. Oh,
Whoa.
That's that damage. That's that big boom that C9 are offering right now.
God, Emenes is strong. 4-1-4, claps Palafox up, not even close, took almost no damage with the shield from the Bloodthirster coming in. And now without Palafox here, it's very difficult for CLG to survive. The Baron has timed out, fortunately for them, but C9 have complete control of the spot side of the map.
They were able to get that inhibitor with Emenes pushing on that mid side prior, and now finally taking down the tier 2. So as Super's coming along for the support across mid, and then the entirety of Cloud9 across bot, they don't look to give up this pressure. Another ultimate engage from Blaber, and it's just right now at the start, and Emenes into the backline. Poome activated the quickness, but is on the retreat towards the fountain. CLG, they don't have a mid laner. They don't have a stance against the taking of this second inhibitor.
Emenes snapbacks have been breaking ankles all game long there, uses that as a chunk out tool, and then knowing that the enemy team's gonna try and punish him, instantly goes back to his original body's position, able to get out, but C9 want to punish.
Dhokla trying to throw it back there and getting the teleport in as well. Decent damage onto Emenes, who now is in the retreat scenario. Palafox getting the ultimate thrown down in the root, so Berserker has fallen. Cloud9 lacking some of their damage, and with no one to really stand in front of them, the rest of CLG just keep on backing.
Berserker's dead though, and Elder is spawning in 10 seconds. CLG are going to brute force down. It's very fortunate for C9 that they were able to get out there without losing more people. They do have an ultimate advantage now in this standoff, so even though they don't have their AD carry, they might be able to fend off CLG, who have to also worry about the super creeps pushing in the mid lane.
And Dhokla's gonna have to spend a little bit of time there just to be able to clear those out before he can join. The rest of CLG does have the teleport to do so. But Cloud9 waiting on Emenes to be able to rejoin them. Poome was looking for the flank angle, has to get over the wall and flash away. Emenes still looking, could not connect to get the collapse onto CLG's support, but it's CLG focusing onto the Elder. Another ultimate this time thrown back by Palafox. Gets the root onto Blaber, but they're keeping their eyes on Dhokla. Emenes going in, he gets the chunk, but is the follow-up good from Cloud9? He's going in for the end of the game. That's one turret, that's two. Who cares about Elder when you got the Nexus in your sights for Cloud9? Cutting into the scrap of CLG. Palafox, can you make the stand against Fudge? What he's got coming for you in the Nexus? A stand for Cloud9, game 1.
C9 through the back door play. The rest of them are giving their bodies up in the river to stop recall, so Fudge can end the game in an absolute barn burner first matchup of the series. It's looking like a good one because CLG were hanging in there throughout the entire first game.
Oh, what a way to end that game that, depending on when you were actually watching, did look for a moment, okay, Cloud9, they're doing their control.
They baited, that was so close, they baited the audio guy. He's like pressing the pop-off music. He's like, wait a minute, Palafox got back. It looked very, very close there for a second. C9, all business after that one. I think maybe a little closer than they wanted it to go. A lot of notes still, because I think they realize now that they're gonna be in for a scrappy series after how that first game went.
Yeah, this is very common with what you see on the faces of a team that's expecting to win just because they know how good they are, but it's not as dominating as they were hoping in that game 1. But if you're CLG, it's very important to make note of what was going well. The fact that you were holding your own in that early game when Cloud9 was positioning themselves to dominate.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of missteps by both teams that they're going to be easily able to identify. C9, some of these team fights where they didn't get the flanks marked correctly, even though they had great objective setup after that. And for CLG, they didn't use the neutral objectives that they were able to win well enough. We talked about the Rift Herald that they were able to get, not really getting the mid turret broken down. Then their first Baron push, also not able to break that mid turret. There's some of these situations where if they could have just got a little bit more influx of gold, a little bit cleaner team fights, maybe they would have been able to win.
There's so much dancing around when we had the Baron and Dragon as possibilities, and how some of the earlier moments when Poome is able to get that great engage and the flanks work out expertly, CLG make the play happen. But when Cloud9 was on top of it and shut it down, then a bit more difficulty to bring it in. But CLG definitely have some tools that they can work with going into the rest of these series. For now, though, everyone remember, Viva la LCS! LCS en Español is the official Spanish language stream of the LCS. This new viewing experience is live on LLA's Twitch and YouTube channels right now, so scan the QR code or just go to lolesports.com to learn more. Time for us to head on over to the LCS Lounge, though, to break that one down.
Welcome back. That was a game.
Yeah, well, something.
A lot that we had already expected, to be fair. So we can. I'm actually going to ping you on just like, did the draft at least hit the expectations that you had?
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
I think CLG went for kind of like a standard team comp, but then C9 went for like a. It looked kind of weird to me what they were doing. They had like a lot of poke into a Sion team comp, but I guess they were just able to like kind of ignore the Sion and just poke the other players down.
Yeah.
And at first I thought the Yone pick was a bit out of touch with what they wanted, but I mean, it worked out great.
Yeah, let's roll some of the fights. So
the game ender.
Yeah.
Right here.
I mean, this one, it actually looked for a second like CLG might finally have an angle, but you have to remember they have 2 inhibs down, and that's what Fudge remembered, so he just teleports in and ends the game.
And I think this is kind of a bit of the story, like back half story of what happened with these teams, because even when CLG was able to force C9 to kind of fight them, C9 had an opportunity from the way that they'd set up their side lane pressure or push pressure elsewhere.
Yeah, they had tempo pretty much the whole game, is what it felt like. This was the one close fight where it looked like, or no, this wasn't the fight. This is where Berserker actually dies. This was the good one for CLG. Then the Drake fight after that is the one where they were actually able to peel Contractz. But this is where it looked like CLG might take the win.
Yeah, and there were some fights earlier on around Drake where C9 kind of failed in that respect. So like there was Jayce coming in too late. He was like close enough where it's like, I don't want to just TP to the fight. But at the same time, C9 was like just pumping DPS on a Drake, and Emenes was chasing the Rakan. I'm sure we'll see it later on, but it's like all that was happening. Great from Emenes to at least get one pick, but still, CLG on this specific fight was able to get Baron, back away. And I was like, okay, even though C9 was ahead,
this fight,
CLG has a chance.
And with these kind of fights, right, like what CLG is doing is technically correct. You want to look for flanks on the poke composition after you have things set up. But then this is just executed very poorly.
Yeah, Emenes and Blaber did a great job at holding any follow-up from happening. I thought the Maokai ulti and just basically being a shield for this team and just made Wukong just get popped, I thought was a great call from Blaber specifically to make that fight doable. And they had all 5 members there in comparison to the last fight. So I was like, C9, as the game got on, was playing fights a lot better. Already had control on side, so they were already annoying. So CLG really had to find the best fights. There was one fight earlier on that I thought that CLG was playing really well, but just were missing abilities onto the Maokai and just ended up being a 2-for-1 in favor of C9.
Yeah, and I think that this game kind of like, it felt like C9 was kind of just in the driver's seat the whole time. You know, like we were saying earlier, they were controlling the sideways and the tempo of the game, and it kind of goes in the way of the way they drafted as well. They're really good at playing side lane, and once they have the setup, they kind of just play in the setup with the poke, and it's really hard for CLG to find a response unless they get like the perfect flank like we saw a couple times.
Yeah.
So Jensen, we were talking before about how C9 generally just picks winning lanes, and then they use that to transition to victory, and that if CLG can actually do fine in the laning phase, that they should have an advantage in a standard game, but they still lost. So if you're CLG here, what do you think they're doing, or how would you try and prepare to pick up a win?
I mean, I'm hoping they'll do something a bit more crazy. We'll see Dhokla off tanks. I like watching him play Yone because he's really good at creating the side lane pressure, and I think that's kind of what he excels at. So I think they need to try to change it up a bit. I know tank top is very meta, but I think CLG is a type of team that can play a different style than what you're used to. So I'm hoping they'll change it up a little bit and not play these standard front to back with a tank.
And then from this game specifically, I think in addition to that, the thing I would like to see from them is just better Like, obviously, you know C9 are going to draft heavy prio, right? It's what they've been doing. It's what they did in this game to initially get those setups, to initially get onto side lanes well before CLG. So they do need something in their draft that gives them a little bit more prio, so they're not always behind on a lot of these setups.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, I think another problem they had this game was they were just too weak in the early game. They had losing lanes everywhere, seemingly.
Yeah.
But like you said, that's kind of just the way C9 drafts. But they got to find somewhere to get prio, right? Or it's going to be very tough to deal with.
Yeah, I like the idea of the 3-camp early game top lane that came from Contractz. It was just a really long gank because they just didn't have the damage for Jayce in the end. So I was like, oh, that's tough. So I'm expecting more carries. I expect them probably to move away from the sign. We'll probably see. It's a blue side being selected from CLG. So I'm interested to see what the draft's going to be. But we'll end up seeing it. So we're going to be going to a break. So as we head to the break, before Game 2, Blaber started his prep for today's series a little earlier than usual. Take a look.
You're catching next game.
Oh. Hey.
Oh, 1 second, guys. I left my backpack inside. Oh, there it is. Oh, shit. Hello? Can anyone open this for me? Hello? Anybody here? Guess I'm alone in the LCS. I'm alone in the LCS. So, King Poro, just wanted to ask you who you think the best League of Legends player is right now. Yeah? Blaber? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good take.
Prove yourself and
rise! Rise! It's only been 30 minutes? What am I gonna do for the next 10 hours? I'm not sure I'm gonna make it. Just please let my teammates know that they're really boosted, especially Berserker.
make them remember you rise.
Diet with caffeine.
Nailed it.
And then hiding in the brush was
Teemo!
Team issues, huh?
Non-stop. I hate them all.
That's rough.
Why is it so slow?
What?
No, click a button.
So with wax on, wax off, wax on first. And then what you want to do is you go ahead and you click on.
We got the keys the whole time?
Sometimes being lost and not knowing your way out is much better. It's not often two people have such a profound moment like we did tonight. These moments can't be lost. You really need to understand what they mean to you forever and ever.
Red Bull gives you wings. Who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
We have to tell everyone that we just switched to Verizon's new Welcome Unlimited plan for just $30.
I've already told everyone.
Wait, did you say Verizon for just $30?
It's their best unlimited price ever.
$30? That's awesome. Yeah, and it's from the most reliable 5G network in America.
For $30 a line, I'm switching now.
Yeah, it's easy. And you get $960 when you switch the whole family.
Wow, I gotta let my buddies know.
We're already here.
The network you want, the price you love, only from Verizon.